Happy Sunday, November, a month of gratitude, a month of Thanksgiving, right? So I discovered something and I was reminded of something that I think can help me live not only the month in gratitude, but maybe my whole life in gratitude. So I'm going to start today. There's three things I want to share, but I'll only share one of them today, and then in the next couple of weeks, it'll be like a three-part series. So let me ask you a question first, and that is, what is God's will for your life? Have you ever thought about that and wondered about that? What is God's will? Think about that, and continue to think about that as we go through this today. What is God's will? Sometimes a lot of Christians I know are pretty miserable, sad and suffering and somber, and they think that maybe that suffering and sadness has something to do with God's will. But I'm wondering if it's more beautiful than that. It's something to do with joy and love and life. And that's the message that Jesus came to share, resurrection life. So there's a rather obscure verse in 1 Thessalonians, and Paul's getting to the end of his letter and he's summarizing things, and it's kind of a whirlwind of suggestions he's giving us, but I think then he gives us a great invitation. And here's what he says. 1 Thessalonians 5:16 through 18 says this. He writes this: "Be joyful always, pray continually, and give thanks in all circumstances, for this is God's will for you." So God's will has to do with something like being joyful, living in constant awareness of God's presence through prayer, and being thankful. Wonderful. So be joyful. Be joyful. Now, joy is a fruit of the Spirit. And we know from the Gospels that Jesus talks about in John that he says that my joy may be in you and your joy may be complete. So we know that joy, God is love and joy, and in God we have that. But I think this verse is inviting us an invitation to do something. Be joyful. Do joy. So a question I have for you, and I'd love to get your responses to this, is how do you do joy? And then it's not only doing joy once in a while, it is always being joyful. Being joyful always. How do we do that? And for some of us, with our personalities and who we are, we have the, so to speak, the spiritual gifts of being cynical, pessimistic, or Scandinavian. So being somber and serious and negativity is a hard thing to overcome. But here's the invitation: be joyful. And I think there's a perspective also that we need. Several years ago, I was doing spiritual direction with Sister Margie, a Catholic nun, and I loved her, and she really helped me in a period of life where I was struggling. And I was talking to her about my misery and my sadness and my seriousness, how hard life was. And she told me a story, very simply. She said, "Bill, I think when people get to heaven, God's going to ask them one question." And I'm like, "What, Sister Margie? What is he going to ask them? What is it?" And she said, God is going to ask them, "Were you happy? Did you enjoy yourself? Were you filled with the joy of my life and my love?" And there'll be a lot of people who are like, "Wait a minute, what? You mean that's the point of what it was all about?" Because you may be like me and you struggle with this seriousness. I take myself way too seriously. I can be way too somber at times and create so much misery in my life. And some people may argue against this, that the goal, God's will, is not to be joyful. Isn't it? Viktor Frankl, who was through the worst of the concentration camps, talks about the power of something. And here's what he says. And he experienced the worst, didn't he? You can take away everything from a human being except one thing. the power to choose. So the invitation throughout this month and the rest of our lives is to choose joy, to be joyful. Yeah. And when we do that, things begin to change. Joseph Campbell said, "Find a place where there's joy, and the joy will burn out the pain." So an application, and this might be a silly application, but take what's helpful and leave the rest. St. Teresa of Avila has this quote, "From serious and silly devotions and sour-faced saints, deliver me, O God." So how do we put this all in practice? Here's a simple application I've been thinking of. Here it is. Smile. Smile. Maybe you want to try as a spiritual devotion or meditation for you this week. Wake up in the morning and smile. Just smile. Now, I've heard scientific studies say that when we put a pencil in our teeth and smile like that, it actually, the chemicals that flow through our body increase happiness and joy. So why not try it? Smile. And then when you go throughout the day, maybe you want to try this radical thing. Smile at other people. They say that joy that is shared is doubled. And then the third suggestion is when you get to the end of your day, ask this question: what made me smile today? And think about that, reflect on that, and then offer that as a prayer of thanksgiving to God. So there you go. Take what's helpful, leave the rest, and until next time, may you live all the days of your life.